Welcome everyone to the Zero Net Emissions from Agriculture CRC first online all partner webinar, where we're going to give you an update on everything that's going on with the establishment of the CRC. Before we begin, I would just like to acknowledge that I'm hosting this webinar from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. The ZNE Ag CRC also acknowledges the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal people and their ongoing cultures and connections to the land and waters of Australia. So, as I said, what we're going to go through today, I'm going to give a bit of an update just on exactly where we're up to in terms of the establishment of the CRC. We're then going to go through some of the feedback from the partner meeting that many of you will have attended in May. Really great feedback that we got from that and how we've been distilling that and thinking about what you told us at that meeting. We'll give you an update then on progress of the Fast Start projects and where that process is up to. Talk a little bit about also the progress in deciding on the producer demonstration sites and the network that's going to exist around those. And then we'll finish off with a quick update on the education and training program part of the CRC. That should take about an hour. And then we've allowed in the diary invitation half an hour for Q&A. If we use all of that, that's fine. If we don't, that's also fine as well. But we've got plenty of time for question and answer session at the end if you want to hold your questions until then. So firstly, where are we up to? So very pleasingly, we have executed the Commonwealth Agreement, which is the overarching agreement for the CRC that spells out essentially the 10 years for the CRC in terms of funding, milestones that we're going to be delivering against, and so on. That's been a huge effort to get that across the line, and it's been really pleasing that we've been able to do that well and truly in advance. So that was done, executed a couple of weeks ago, well and truly in advance of the official start date of the CRC, which is in fact today. Now, once we have now got that Commonwealth Agreement executed, the attention has really been on getting the partner agreements executed and returned to us. Progress on that has been fantastic, and the vast majority of partner agreements have now come back to us. It's actually really important for us to get those partner agreements signed and partners committed to the CRC, because until we've got all of those partner agreements signed, we actually don't know quite exactly how much money that we have to invest, because the partner agreements detail the investment from each partner. And until we have that certainty of investment, it is difficult for us to cash flow with certainty and to make, to commit with confidence in investments for Fast Start projects, for instance. So we're really aiming at trying to get all the partners signed and across the line in advance of the first board meeting, which will be occurring on the 22nd of July. So at that board meeting, we can start straight away making investment decisions around projects and other activities when we've got certainty on the cash flow that we're going to have. The other thing that's been happening in conjunction with the development of the consultation on the Commonwealth Agreement and the partner agreements is that we've had a couple of rounds of feedback on the constitution of the company. And, just really want to highlight the spirit of engagement and the constructive feedback we've been getting from all our partners on all the agreements, including the Constitution as well. So the Constitution has been slightly modified over a couple of rounds of feedback, and that has now been adopted as the company Constitution as well. The other really important thing that's been happening is that we've been running through the election process for the Board of Directors and onboarding our executive team. So firstly, the Board of Directors, and as we spoke about at the partner meeting in May, the process for deciding on the Board of Directors was that the Tier 1 and 2 partners nominated people into a pool. That pool was then, nominations from that pool were then selected by the establishment committee and put back to the tier 1 and 2 partners for a vote. Through that vote, Nick Austin, Chris Murphy, Kat Giles, and Melanie Leather were all confirmed as new directors. And Deb Cousins, Tress Walmsley, and Tony Lee have continued on as directors from the establishment committee, actually all the way from the very first bid committee through the establishment committee, and now go onto the full board. We also then, subsequent to that, ran a process to seek a suitably qualified director with financial qualifications to be able to chair the Audit and Risk Committee, and Meg McKechnie was successful in that role just late last week. That was all confirmed. So we've now got the full board there that you can see that will be the initial board of directors for the CRC, and the first meeting will be on the 22nd of July. Really, really pleased to talk about the exec team now that has been onboarded to the CRC as well. So all of these people are on the call today, apart from Rachel Buchanan, who has had to take some leave to deal with a family bereavement. But we've got Georgia Shield as COO, Rian Retief as CFO, Ben Hayes, Research Director, continues on from the development of the bid and the establishment all the way through. Rachel Buchanan, as I just mentioned, as Head of Communications, and Annie Cox as Executive Assistant to the team. And then we've got the research team underneath that. So Vicky Lane as Research Program 1 Leader, Phil Verco as Research Program 2 Leader, Rich Eckhart as Research Program 3 Leader, Merritt Crack as Research Program 4 Leader, Janelle Wilkes as Education and Training and Adoption Leader. Those 5 have been part of the bid process all the way through, and really happy now to announce Mick Taylor as the new Producer Demonstration Site Lead. You'll be hearing from Georgia, Rian, and Mick later on in the seminar, in the webinar briefly as well. So that's it for me, just for an update on the progress of the company, where we're up to in terms of establishment, the new board, the new team. I'm going to hand over now to Ben Hayes, the Research Director, and he's going to start going through some of the feedback that we've been accumulating from the partner meeting in May. Ben?
Okay, thank you, Richard, and wonderful to have you all on the webinar today. So to kick this part of the webinar off, I just want you to cast your minds back to May and sitting there in the Pullman Hotel with all the partners in the CRC. It was a fantastic meeting. And think back to that session we had, quite extensive session, putting your input down on the Miro board. Just to remind you, what we asked to do on that Miro board was for each milestone of the CRC in all the different program areas, jot down some potential projects, some information about organisational capability that could address and help deliver on those milestones, some commentary on what is happening out there in relationship to those milestones, so existing activities and sort of known future activities, any barriers to impact, industry needs in those milestone areas, and really importantly, how adoption can be enhanced. Next slide, thanks, Richard. I've spent, and some of us have spent, quite a bit of time going through this document. It did get sent out to all partners, and those of you that have glanced at it will know it's 78 pages. So it contains a very large amount of information. When you start going through it, you're struck by the fact that it really is an incredibly valuable document. It really does have some really important information for the CRC in it. For one thing, when you do go through it, I think it does validate that our milestones are the right ones. there's a lot of input from industry partners, research partners, state governments and so on, just reflecting that those milestones are appropriate. And it also, in fact, reinforces some of the projects that we described in the stage 1 and stage 2 bid and have come through in fast start projects are going in the right direction as well. They might suggest some projects that are pretty similar, build on some of those projects and so on. So I think it really does validate the work done to date. One thing that really struck me is in that capability section, across the nation, we have a deep base of skills and experience across industry partners, research partners, state governments and so on. We need to make an effort to capture this base of skills and experience capability appropriately. And we're going to take some actions really shortly to allow us to do that, to build projects with bigger impact. The document already shows the value of collaboration. You can see emerging out of some of the statements that people were sitting next to people from other organisations. They were starting to riff off each other to develop more, what would you say, collaborative projects that would have a higher impact. So that was really pleasing. And there are some exceptionally creative and potentially high impact ideas in there that we want to capture. So I think it was a important, really important exercise. In terms of what's going to happen next, one thing we're going to do is take those expertise, experience and capability statements and put them into a database to help with project development so that project teams can look to see who would add value to their projects by searching on keywords and so on. We're going to initiate some scoping studies. So some prospective ideas have come through. I'm going to show you an idea of a couple of those. They're not the final scoping studies by any means, but just an idea of what sort of areas are coming through. And then there's some really good statements or ideas around extension and adoption activities. So with your indulgence, I'm just going to highlight a few interesting things that came out of the document. A few of these might result in scoping studies, but just to give you a feel for the value of this document. One thing that actually came up time and time again was our producer demonstration sites. We talked in the past about biodiversity and having a link through to assess how emissions reduction technologies interact with biodiversity. We've got an opportunity to do that on our demonstration sites. AgForce has actually come up with a biodiversity certification or approach. They call it AgCare-E. The intention, I think, is we're going to link to that activity from AgForce and try and get our demonstration sites hooked up to that certification. Would be a really smart thing to do, I think. And that came through multiple times in the document. Just on interesting areas, some of you will know because you work in the field, but there's this potential to perennialise some crops and forages, and both for grain, that should be grain, not gain, and forage, and look at the impact on emissions. And there's work going on both in this country and overseas to look at the impact of that. So that's something to follow up. Somebody pointed out, this may have been ANU person, I'm not quite sure, but there's an interaction between the fertiliser and pasture space, of course, but looking at low emission fertilisers that support establishment of low emissions pastures in rangeland production systems. That's something that's not often thought about, but a good idea. Another thing from ANU, this is more a, what would you call it, further down the pipe, more high risk idea that we could explore is plant-to-plant signalling between cover crops and perennial fruit trees to reduce the amount of chemical inputs needed. So that's an interesting idea for exploration down the track. Something a bit closer, and the numbers you see here are the alignment to the milestones in the CRC. Something that we may act on much sooner because it's an early stage milestone is getting up proxies for methane emissions of grazing cattle and sheep. And there were suggestions around looking at fecal NIR, also look at sequencing the plant material in feces, and perhaps integrating with satellite data on pasture quality and abundance to come up with good metrics on methane emissions. So there's some interesting ideas to explore in that space. In the rumen modification, setting up cattle and sheep to have low emissions over their lifetime, riffing off what was developed in the COVID pandemic, there's an idea around looking at novel RNA-based strategies, which is a great idea. In the same area, there's this idea that you could set up cows to pass on rumen microbes that result in lower emissions from their progeny over their lifetime. I know a little bit about that area. I'd have to say the science isn't laid down, but certainly if you can pull that off, it has a lot of promise. So looking to see what's out there and how to build that area would be interesting. In the benchmarking area, there are some interesting comments there. I think one that's come up, and it came up at the beef conference up in Rocky recently as well, is we've got this plan to look at how we fit in our carbon benchmarking to international benchmarks. Sorry, Richard, can you just stay on that for a second? There is this idea that we have to be involved when those international benchmarks are being laid down or are being decided on, so that it does accommodate Australian production systems. And that's a very important suggestion, which we're taking on board. There's also life cycle analysis forms quite an important part of the CRC. Just input from the Cotton Research Development Corporation. We need to be aware of what's happening internationally, of course. So some really useful comments there. Next slide, thanks, Richard. Okay, and just to pick up a few more comments, this is the last slide on this. There was an interesting suggestion on looking at opportunities to empower Indigenous women to grow and produce food in local communities to reduce the emissions required to get food to those remote communities. Has a whole heap of other nutritional benefits, of course, but it could have an emissions impact. That's something worth exploring. In the 4.1 area, this milestone is all about looking at policy settings and barriers to uptake of emissions technology. There are some very useful suggestions here about needing to engage stakeholders right through that process in that development of policy settings, so that, well, you can see what's happened like in Denmark just recently, where they've implemented a methane tax that just gets pushed down on people. Then you get tremendous pushback. We need to do those things. I'm not saying a methane tax, but the policy settings in collaboration, so that kind of outcome doesn't happen. 4.2 is around the agrivoltaic, so actually more precisely incorporating renewable energy into farming systems. There's lots of activity, lots of interested people in that space, a lot going on already. In the CRC, I think we need to be pretty careful about trying to fill in the gaps and overcoming barriers rather than trying to do it all. So scoping out where we can be most effective is important. Just on that area, I think again, this came from ANU, really nice suggestion about something we can do in the longer term, coming up with a database or catalogue of plants, agricultural plants and crops and so on, that grow well under solar panels for different regions is probably a good thing to have, so that growers can be advised when those systems start to appear. And lastly, 4.4, that area milestone in the CRC is about tracing the cost and emissions across supply chains. So how do you spread the cost of methane mitigating technologies across supply chains, for example, and pointing out we already have projects in that area around beef, but pointing out they can be extended to wool and other areas. And we've got a really good group of industry partners in that area. So I hope that just gives you a snapshot of what's coming out of that document. As I said, 78 pages. I've just pulled some examples out of that, but we'll be working with that in the weeks to come. So just want to thank everybody for the enormous effort they put in and say I think it's going to be really beneficial for the CRC. Okay. Back to you, Richard, I think.
Thanks, Ben. So I think we're just going to hand over quickly now to Georgia, who's going to talk a little bit about some process we'll be running to collect ongoing information from all our partners about capability in particular, just so we can keep enhancing this incredible feedback that we've got from the partner meeting. Georgia?
Thank you, Richard. Hello, everyone. I'll just take this opportunity to quickly introduce myself as well. So I'm Georgia Shield. I'm the Chief Operating Officer. This is the start of week 2, and I'm thrilled to be here with you. So a bit about me. I have a bit of a diverse background across operations and strategic partnerships roles within RDCs, startups, and corporates. I started my career in civil engineering, actually, but for the last 6 years have been devoted to food and agriculture, which is very much my passion. I'm responsible for what it says on the tin, business operations, but what that means for us here at the CRC is really fostering effective partnerships and collaborations and supporting the strategic direction of the CRC in partnership with the rest of the team. So to talk a little bit more about partner capabilities and how we're looking to map those. So put simply, we're going to make sure that all of the capabilities that you identified through that partner workshop in May will be pulled into our project management system as a matrix. And then ongoing, we'll continue to touch base with you in the coming months to sort of validate that those are, in fact, the capabilities that you would like to work with the CRC on, and you can continue to add to them over time. So it will very much be a live document. And the purpose of it for us will really be looking at future resources for project development. So making sure that we're leveraging the full breadth and depth of expertise within our partners when we're looking to design projects, implement, and execute. So that's sort of how it will be brought to life. And I'll be able to provide a little bit more guidance in the coming months about how we'll continue to capture that information. That's a little bit from me. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Georgia. Excellent. So we're going to go back now to Ben, who will talk a bit more about the Fast Start projects.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Next slide, thanks. So Fast Start projects. The reason we had a round of Fast Start projects was really we have some early milestones we just have to deliver on. We've got milestones in 2025 next year and 2026 and the following years as well. Our Commonwealth Agreement says we have to deliver on those. Can you just go back for a sec, Richard? Thanks. Also, some of the projects were quite specifically described in the stage 1 and stage 2 bid. And these were actually the projects that, in part at least, got us over the line with the bid. So we are expected to deliver on those. The way we set it up was the tier 1 and tier 2 partners, they have to get some benefit from their contributions. So they were first in line with proposing fast track projects. And we've really focused on these, again, with the goal of delivering on those early milestones. Yep, next, thanks. So the process in getting these projects up, we were guided by what was articulated in the stage 1 and stage 2 bid and the milestones. The project teams have worked really closely with the program leaders to ensure the projects deliver on the milestones, or will deliver, are set up to deliver on the milestones. There's a really good partner team in the projects to maximise impact and to ensure a clear pathway right through to commercialisation, adoption in most cases, and reducing emissions. And all of the partners would have received the project template, so they had to hit the criteria described in the project template, which were largely what you see above. So the process that was gone through when working out which fast start projects would go forward, the proposals came through after they were developed with the project teams. Then we had a meeting of the Research Advisory and Management Committee. And this committee consists of myself and the program leads. So the projects came in to, let's call it the RAMIC. We spent 2 days going through those projects, discussing, did they hit those criteria or not? Could they be improved, and how could they be improved? Were they suitable to go to the next stage, or should they be sent back to the project teams for further development? So just to let you know, the next stage, sorry, Richard, can you just go back? The next stage is that these projects have now actually gone to the Establishment Committee, which is a pre-board committee. Because the board only officially starts on the 1st of July, this was a committee that was in place to allow things to proceed before that. In the future, as is on the slide, projects will go up to the Research Investment and Commercialisation Committee, which is a subset of the board, and they'll also go through an Industry Advisory Committee, which will look at projects from the point of view, do they hit industry needs? And is the commercialisation appropriately articulated and set up? But for these fast starts, they went through this Establishment Committee. Next slide, thanks. So the Research and Advisory Management Committee, RAMIC, received 20 projects. They were reviewed over the 2 days to assess them against those criteria, and 15 were approved to go forward to the Establishment Committee. All of the projects had some modifications along the lines of please look at the partner profile, have some early stop-go milestones, and so on. Those projects have come back to the RAMIC, and now on Friday, they went forward to the Establishment Committee. And the update there is the Establishment Committee has assessed the project portfolio, found that to be in accordance with what the CRC needs in terms of meeting milestones. And the EC also had some great recommendations on the projects to increase the impact. Our challenge now is, and we'll be working with the project teams over the next week, is we had an oversubscription on the budget with these projects. We need to pull that funding back because we can't use up all the budget with these first projects. We have to make room, a lot of room for future projects as well. So the process now is we're working with the project teams, and once that's done, the projects will go forward to the board, the full CRC board, on July the 22nd for final tick off, and then the projects will start. Next slide, thanks. Just to give you a flavour for the projects that are in that tranche of 15, in program 1, we have a number of pastures projects. reflecting the fact that this is a really key area for the CRC. We think we can make a lot of impact with new pastures that reduce methane emissions when grazed by cattle and sheep. Couple of fertiliser projects in there as well that aim to reduce nitrous oxide emissions, really important area for the CRC. Program 2, we have one proxy measures project that is quite nicely joined up across different partners to come up with a range of proxy measures for measuring methane in individual cattle and sheep. That actually feeds in to our selection for low methane project. So exploiting genetic variation to reduce methane from cattle and sheep. And we also have a rumen modification project. So setting up rumens for lower methane emissions. Program 3, we have 2 projects very much following the milestones for that project. One around metrics and benchmarking, and one around integrated farming systems analysis, working with the producer demonstration sites. And then finally in Program 4, we have an emerging project around behavioural and policy insights, one starting project around agrivoltaics, and 2 very nice industry-led projects around improved supply chain traceability, specifically around how you can distribute the costs of methane emissions, reducing emissions across the supply chain. So yeah, some projects that are really going to set us up well to hit some of those early milestones in the CRC. What's going to happen next? After that tranche, we've decided there'll be another round of fast track later in the year. It'll depend how many projects are in good shape by a certain time, but perhaps November, perhaps earlier if those projects are in good shape. And the starting point will be the projects that didn't go forward this time. We'll be working with the teams to help get their project over the line. There will be some new projects required to hit milestones. So we're going to do some gap analysis to hit those projects described in stage 1 and 2, and also the early milestones. And of course, we're going to, now the CRC has officially started today, we're going to have some focus on Tier 1 and Tier 2, of course, but expand out to include Tier 3 and 4 to increase the impact and with the overall goal of reducing emissions. So I think that's it, and I think I'm going to pass over to Rhiannon now, to talk about budgets.
Can't hear you, Rhiannon. How are we going now? You're off mute. No, it might be something wrong with your mic. So if you want to have a quick look at that, and we can come back to you later. But look, what Rhiannon was going to mention, and Ben did mention it briefly as well. You know, we've had an overwhelming response to the Fast Start project call, which has been great, really great collaboration. I just want to emphasise that in terms of the collaborations that have been put together to put project ideas forward. The result of that is that we do have a very substantial investment ask. Now, we want to make sure that in contracting and developing up this first round of Fast Start projects, that we make sure we have room to fund more Fast Start projects and other activities going forward. So we do need to make sure that we leave headroom, that we leave enough room to invest in other activities of the CRC. That's the process that we're going through right now in terms of ongoing negotiation with all the project proponents, to look at budgets, to get them as sharp as we can, so that we make sure we can continue to fund lots of other activities out of the CRC. Rhiannon, I think...
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, got you now.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. Just a quick introduction, everyone, from me. My background, really quickly coming into Australia, worked in the travel industry for 10 years, and then moved into the education sector. Was in the education sector for about 13 years, spending the last 4 years of that in research. And that's where I suppose I gained a passion for trying to better understand the research that takes place. So I'm thrilled to be part of the CRC and hoping that I can in some way make a difference. Just from my point of view, just to reiterate a couple of points from Ben around the fast start projects, we really need to be mindful of the financial sort of position we're in at the start. We want to be able to manage our finances carefully and correctly in order for us to be able to have a second round in November, as Ben mentioned, to make sure we can have some more projects. At the same time, we want to be able to allow for more activity down the track. Just remembering this is a 10-year project, not a 2-year project, so we need to make that the finances last that time. We need to sort of understand the financial buffer that we require across the 10 years. Certainly what that'll do is it'll help us to be proactive in making decisions on further opportunities as they arrive. So my responsibility really over this time is going to be to ensure sound financial sustainability for the CRC. So if anybody does have any questions for me, please feel free to reach out at any time and we can happy to have those discussions. Thanks.
Thanks, Rian. Okay, I'd like to introduce Mick Taylor now, who has started as the producer demonstration site lead. Mick's going to introduce a bit about himself and then talk about where we're up to with that process.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Just looking through the list of attendees, there's quite a few of you I've already met and know, and those I haven't met. Looking forward to working with you. I've been around adoption and extension and the space for around about 20 years now. A lot of the last role was working with McDonald's to deliver their Australia and New Zealand greenhouse gas emission strategy. Before that, I've worked with Landcare Australia and MLA as with their feed-based sustainability program, and spent quite a bit of time with Australian and state governments. So bit of an all-rounder. I'm very excited to be working in this group, and I'd specifically like to thank Janelle and Ben for the work that they've sort of given me a pretty good launch pad to start on. A lot of the work that we've got to do to get these hubs up. Ben spoke a lot about the excellent work that come through from the planning day and the proposals. So for the last couple of days, I've been working through that to see where everything fits and what's there at the moment. The idea of these producer demonstration sites is 25 sites on the 25 agroecological zones around Australia. And the idea is to stack as many of these research projects on ground with farmers in real time to show what that looks like. I'm reading through early, I've seen a lot of the researchers commencing in universities and research funds, which is excellent. But the big emphasis on putting this in farm in various locations and agroecological zones to make sure that we can maximise the uptake and adoption of those commercialisation of those products that come out of the research. At the moment, as I said, I've had an excellent board to start with. Lots of heavy lifting has been done already. What we've gone, by now you've probably received a template if you're interested in putting a PDS site together. If you haven't got that template, my details are on the screen there. Reach out and we can have a look at that. And if you have got a template and you're keen to have a bit of a question, we've had a few people reach out already wanting to talk about what their thinking is on what a producer demonstration site would look like. So by all means, that's what I'm here for. Flip me an email or a phone message and we can catch up about what you're thinking before you put your application in. If you haven't got your template, please reach out to them. When they come in, the proposals are due by 5 p.m. on the 30th of July. When they come in, we'll go through that same rigorous review process to look at how and where and why, where they best fit and how they can best be used, and at what time they sort of start to operate in the system. We're also going to be going through identifying project managers for those sites and places. So by the time we get the proposals in late July, aim is to have it in and signed off by September, so we can start actually contracting and getting them underway. So by the time we get to the beginning of 2025, we're locked and loaded to really start building that community engagement and starting to roll out stuff on site where people can actually see, touch and feel the research as it happens. Some of the work we've still got to do is more deeply putting together a clear understanding of what each of the on-site needs will be, and that's why those one-on-one conversations with you about what you think you need or what we have missed and things like that will be really important. Ultimately, the sites are all going to be very different, but we're going to have to try and get as much overlap as we can with the different sites, so we are reporting across all the sites with some commonality in it, so we get clear data and clear messaging from it. So we're working through some of the, how that's going to happen. And once we start putting people in those roles, we've got some management constraints around how that's going to happen and how we're going to communicate as a team. And we'll be providing regular, updates and catch ups so that the hubs are working together as one, as common areas as we can, but also then identifying the individual areas and what the differences are, so that the whole hubs are learning off each other, and it's an active learning space. So in the next in the next month, we'll be sort of working on the final documents. How do we set that site up? Who's involved in it? How do we manage the data? So we're still working through that, and that's why it's really important to have those discussions. So if you're keen to put a site together, if you haven't got the template or anything like that, by all means reach out and give me a yell. And by the time we get to the end of the first month, we have a really clear picture of how this will roll out and the forms and documents agreed, so we can move forward.
Thanks, Mick. So a lot of activity going on there at the moment around the selection of producer demonstration sites. And again, as I emphasised before, with the engagement through the Fast Start projects, just so great to see such positive and constructive engagement from the partners in terms of potential producer demonstration site identification. So apologies, I think I shared the wrong screen when Mick was presenting then, so you might have seen a few extra screens coming up, but we're going to hand over now to Janelle Wilkes, who is the leader of the Education and Training Program, and she's going to give a quick update on where that's up to. And I shall attempt to share the right screen this time. So let's see how we go with this one. No, that's still the wrong one, I think. You start talking, Janelle, and then I'll get the right one up.
All right, thanks, Richard. And it's great to be here today, and good morning or afternoon. And great that we have Mick on board as well with our producer demonstration sites, because of course for the education and training, we need to work really closely with those demonstration sites, because it's going to be cross-cutting across all of the programs, but especially with education and training. So you will have heard about Fast Start projects that have coming through. And so we already have some PhD students that are being put forward there, because again, speaking to what Ben was saying about our milestones, we have got some early milestones. Richard, would I be able to go to the next slide, please? Excellent, thank you. So we've also got our Indigenous Academy. So working with our First Nations partners is going to really be kicking off now that we begin the CRC. We also have our undergraduate modules. So we have many partner universities that are keen to include modules on meeting our zero net emissions, and we want to have case studies that come from the demonstration sites that are coming in there. But also for the industry that are listening, if you wish to have things portrayed in those modules, please make sure that you reach out to me. We also have our workforce training. And so again, this co-development. So there's going to be more conversations there in terms of what short courses are actually required, what a micro-credential will really look like, and what's actually valuable for industry. So that is still a work in progress, which will definitely be starting to ramp up now that we've started the CRC. And finally, we've got our designing and delivering the professional development for high school and vet educators. So making sure that everybody's speaking this common language and that starts at school, but also that common language is going to be that thread that goes through everything for education and training, that we're all speaking that language. So that's really a wrap up of where we're up to with education and training at the moment.
Great, thanks, Janelle. So look, we've now got plenty of time for Q&A. I'm going to start just by there are a couple of questions in the Q&A that I'll address. Just firstly, there's been a couple around the feedback from the partner meeting and the Miro board. The document that was sent to everyone that attended that partner meeting, the 80-something odd pages long, was a direct transcript of everything that was captured on that Miro board. So if you've had a chance to have a look at that and you don't see things that you inputted on the day into the Miro board, please let us know, because that should have captured everything. It was just a straight out direct export transcript from Miro that was then put into a Word document. So if there's stuff missing out of that, let us know and we'll make sure that it's included. And then to Annette Cowie's questions, yes, that Ben just gave a very brief snapshot of some of the key points that we've distilled out of that. There is much, much more there, and I can guarantee you that it's becoming a reference document that we refer to constantly in terms of when we're looking for what partners have said around their capability and ideas around how to utilise that capability. So there is a lot more there than what we were able to cover in the few minutes that Ben talked about it at the beginning of the presentation. There's a question about the Fast Start projects and the process that they went through, and this first round not going through the Industry Advisory Committee. That is correct. Now, when all partners signed up to the CRC process as part of the bid, there was a term sheet that was supplied that went through some of the processes that would be applied to the CRC at the beginning of it. And one of those processes was this Fast Start project proposal and process that gave Tier 1 and 2 partners the rights to put projects up quickly, that we would endeavour to move forward as quickly as we could, get them contracted as quickly as we could. So that process was part of the bid process and included in the term sheets. That didn't include the involvement of the Industry Advisory Committee. But we will, we're very conscious that Industry Advisory Committee is really important for ongoing assessment. That Industry Advisory Committee process will come into play in the second round of Fast Start projects. It will be in place by then. The reason it's not in place now is that we actually need the board constituted to be able to appoint the Industry Advisory Committee, and we wanted to move forward on this first round of Fast Start projects and not wait for all of that to happen. Otherwise, things start getting delayed. In terms of the industry involvement in projects, so it's important to point out that one of the fundamental criteria in assessing projects, and that the RAMIC has just gone through, is that every project has to have an industry partner actively as part of the project before it can be considered and approved for investment. So there is industry involvement, industry guidance on each project as they go through. And then the final part of that question, what we're endeavouring to do is to make sure that we don't commit any more than 10% absolute maximum of the lifetime investment of the CRC into this first round of Fast Start projects. as Ben, myself, and Rian talked about, we don't want to lock in a substantial amount of investment in this first round that prevents us then from, other rounds, obviously, of fast starts, but just the normal process of investment then that the CRC will run to develop new projects as it goes through. So hopefully I've addressed some of those early questions there. So there's a question there about how the Industry Advisory Committee will be nominated and elected. So there's a process that will be proposed to the first board meeting in July, and that will be essentially that the industry members, very similar to the way that the board selection process worked, that the industry advisory members nominate people into a pool. The difference from the board selection process, though, is that they don't have to be independent of those companies, obviously, of the members. Whereas the board selection, we've the constitution details that it has to be an independent board. None of the directors can be employees of members of the company. The Industry Advisory Committee members can absolutely be employees of industry members of the CRC. Those industry members will nominate into a pool, and the board will appoint a committee out of those people that are nominated by industry members. So we should have that. If the board approves that process, and if they're comfortable with that, then essentially immediately following that July meeting, we'll start that process going out to industry members to get nominations for that committee. On the round 2 fast track and the gap analysis, we will absolutely be making that known before we start canvassing widely for a second round of projects, because we don't want effort going into the development of projects where we've already got good coverage on milestones for this first round of projects, and we essentially don't have a lot of room to invest in new projects against those same milestones. So we'll be doing portfolio analysis constantly across the range of projects that we're investing in. And one of those aspects of portfolio analysis will be how much money are we investing against each of the milestones. And so, we will have milestones that have appropriate investment against them. We'll make that clear and be looking for projects to fill the milestones that we don't have much money invested against. Okay, I think I've covered all the questions that are in the Q&A right now. So I guess I'll open it up for more questions. If you want to put them in the chat or the Q&A. Not seeing any more come in at this stage. Oh, and as you said, the chat is disabled, but you can put them into the Q&A and we'll see them there. We'll just wait a couple more minutes to see if there's any more questions that come into the Q&A.
While we're waiting, Richard, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Ben.
How often do you think we'll have these webinars? Just so people
quarterly.
know what to expect.
We'll have partner webinars, all partner webinars quarterly at least. But yeah, definitely quarterly, potentially more often if there's specific investment rounds or things that we want to talk about and let partners know what's happening. Okay. So look, before we wrap it up, just to stress again that once we do get to that second round of projects, and in fact, with any interaction around ideation for projects that you partners think that the CRC should be focusing on, the RAMIC committee, Ben and the research program leads are the people that you should be contacting. Their roles essentially now are to work with partners to facilitate project ideas, to take those ideas and develop them up into investable propositions. That's their entire role with the CRC, is to help partners do that and get investable cases up. So please make sure that you know who the program leads are, that you're contacting them when you've got ideas, and they'd be more than happy to help you out with developing up those ideas to try and get them investable. Okay, a few more questions. A rough idea of the budget allocation for round 2 of the Fast Start projects. Look, it's a bit hard to say exactly at this stage because we're still working through Fast Start 1 projects. But you know, what we've got to, I'll just emphasize again, what we've got to be careful of is that we want to be able to invest in projects every year. And so we need to make sure that we leave headroom for next year and the year after. As you would imagine, most people, project proponents, are putting up 2 or 3 or 5 year long projects. And if we use all the budget allocation for those projects, then we have very little room in years 2, 3, 4, and 5 to do more work because of the tails of those projects. So we want to make sure that we're leaving for next year and the year after, you know, a reasonable percentage of the budget to be able to continue to do more work. So what does that mean in terms of an actual budget allocation that we'd have available? Look, I'd rather not say that right now because it's going to depend very much on where we settle with the Fast Start 1 projects. We've also got, I don't want to preempt the board before it meets in July, which is going to set, you know, risk appetite goals around these sorts of things as well, and just what the funding proportions that we have available in each year and against each program and so on. But what I can guarantee and tell you is that with the next round of Fast Start projects, there will be plenty of guidance there in terms of what we're looking for in each program, and how much we have available in each program as well. So question about the deadline for signing up existing members. So as I talked about before, ideally, because it's just going to help so much with exactly those sorts of things I've been talking about in terms of how much we can invest for Fast Start projects and having certainty around that. The more certainty we have by the July meeting, the more confidence we have to invest. And that's really what we're trying to get everyone across the line before then. We do have an absolute limitation of 90 days from when the Commonwealth agreement was executed, which is around the middle of September, I think, is the requirement that we have that's built into the Commonwealth agreement, that we have to have all partners signed up by then. But, you know, the reason we're sort of trying to push it forward to is if we were waiting until September, then we really couldn't invest with any confidence until then, if we don't really know what's coming in. If members pull out, will we be able to bring in new industry partners to fill those leveraged funding gaps? The answer is yes, but with the caveat, we have a very long list of partners that are potential new partners that would like to become involved in the CRC. There's an enormous amount of interest in this CRC. There's a huge willingness for new partners to be involved. So we're going to be careful with that because we certainly don't want, we won't bring new partners in that dilute the leverage of the existing partners. So we'll address that very carefully in terms of the potential for new partners to come in. And again, that will be something that will be going to the first board meeting in July in terms of the partner portfolio, where there are gaps, where we might be trying to fill, essentially. Can we share video of this preso with people in our organisation? Absolutely. That's not a problem. This presentation will be being made once it's finished. Now CRC is up and running, it's possible to receive a full list of partners and their tiers. Yes, once we've executed the partner agreements, then yes, we can. We can't give you that now because it's not finalised, but as soon as it actually is finalised, we can absolutely provide that information. Okay, and anything else coming in? Any of the other panelists want to make any comments?
Nope, nothing from me, Richard.
All right. Well, I might give everyone half an hour back in their day. We're pulling up right on the hour, which is fantastic. Thanks everyone for joining in. We've had fantastic numbers, well over 100 that have come to get an update on what's going on. Look forward to speaking to you again all soon. And just, once again, thank you for the continued strong engagement and the collaborative attitude that everyone's bringing in to their engagement with the CRC. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.